beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations. And grant that, we having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the Queen, the public weal, peace, and tranquility of the island, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
You may be seated, please.
Thank you.
And I got to deal with one of the missile projects. Thank you very much.
This Honourable House resume its sittings. Call of the roll.
Mr. Whittle, Mr. Samura, Mr. Holness, Mr. Clark, Mr. Shaw, Dr. Chan, Mr. Montague, Ms. Grange, Mr. Henry, Mr. Bartlett, Mr. Mackenzie, Mr. Chuck, Mr. Darrell Vaz, Mr. Warmington, Mrs. Robinson, Mr. Hutchinson, Dr. Tufton, Mrs. Williams, Mrs. Malahoo Ford, Mr. Spencer, Mr. Green, Mr. Terrelong, Mr. Main, Mr. Arscott, Mr. Azan, Mr. Brown, Mrs. Brownberg, Dr. Brownberg, pardon me, Mr. Buchanan, Mr. Bunting, Dr. Campbell, Mr. Leslie Campbell, Mr. Clark, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Ms. Daly, Mrs. Dalrymple Philibert, Dr. Dunn, Mr. Fagan, Dr. Ferguson, Mr. Golding, Dr. Guy, Ms. Hannah, Mr. Hales, Mrs. Holness, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Kellier, Dr. McNeil, Miss Nita, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Michael Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Pickersgill, Mr. Redmond, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Stewart, Reverend Thwaites, Mrs. Vaz, Mr. Dwayne Vaz, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Wright, Mr. Bartlett,
Statements by ministers.
Mr. Speaker, there are no statements by ministers today. but we will be having a public business, a matter that has been on the order paper for some time. It will be taken by the Prime Minister, and that's a matter dealing with Human Employment and Resource Training Amendment Act 2019. In addition, we are privileged today to have a presentation by the Minister without Portfolio in the Ministry of Education, Honorable J.C. Hutchinson. Not education. Not education. Not education. But industry, commerce, agriculture, and fisheries. And also, the member from Western St. Andrew will be making his presentation, and the honorable member from Northeast St. Anne will also make her presentation as Minister of Social Security today. So, Mr. Speaker, I know that the Prime Minister will be here shortly, so I would invite you to proceed down to public business and invite the member from North West St. Elizabeth and Minister without Portfolio in the Ministry of Industry, Commerce, Agriculture, and Fisheries, and a couple of other things too.
Minister Hutchinson, could you always, not always, every week a barrel come. Every week a barrel come. Every week. Yes. Mrs. What is it all the time? Nothing's true. Members, please follow the order of business for the day. Next item, announcements.
Laid on the table of the House today are the following: Ministry Paper number 39, and Annual Report for the National Health Fund for the financial year 2015-2016. Ministry Paper number 40, entitled 2018 General and Selective Capital Increases of the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, IBRD. The Interception of Communications Amendment to First Schedule Order 2019, and the Interception of Communications Amendment to First Schedule Order 2019 Resolution. The Proceeds of Crime Amendment to First Schedule Order 2019. Proceeds of Crime Amendment to First Schedule Order 2019 Resolution.
The Leader of Government Business has requested a suspension of all other items and we proceed to public business. Those in favor? Those in favor? Those against? As have it. Public business.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, last week the member from East Kingston and Port Royal asked for time to consult and review and consult the Petrojam Review Committee report, which was laid in Parliament last Tuesday, additionally asked for the report to be discussed at the Economic and Production Committee, right? Mr. Speaker, on this side, we have no objection to the report being discussed at the Economic and Production Committee. We only want to caution that the debate should not be viewed as unending, because we believe that the people of Jamaica are impatient of talking and impatient of debate. And so while we will allow it, while we have no objection, we'd like the member to bear this in mind as that process commences. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister is responding or has responded to a proposal I had made during her presentation, and I think I want to commend her because she did undertake to do that. And perhaps as this matter is being referred to, the Economy and Production Committee House Leader, may I also suggest that there are some accompanying reports, other reports, if those could be provided to me and also to the Chairman of the Economy and Production Committee, so that we are apprised of all the considerations that have gone into this. And I want to signal my own notice to the Chairman of the Economy and Production Committee that I would like to make a presentation to that committee, the member from Western St. Andrew, because I'm hoping at the first meeting of the Energy Council I will have some audience, because I would like to comment on just two aspects of the report that we have received so far in a fulsome way: the recommendation for divestment to the private sector in relation to the refinery operations, and I wouldn't have a difficulty with that. The difficulty I have is with divestment as a terminal. I think it is a strategic asset and it should not be divested to the private sector. But those are matters that I'd like to put before the Economy and Production Committee. And thanks again, Minister.
Mr. Hutchinson. Minister Hutchinson, while you're standing, before you start, I know you would wish me to recognize a number of colleagues and friends and visitors who are here today, and that the House will welcome them. So will you do so now? Welcome our visitors who are here today. I mean that you are to clap to this. Welcome the visitors. Mr. Hutchinson, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is my pleasure to address this honorable House this afternoon for the 31st time and to update you and the nation on our activities since the last sectorial debate. Let me begin with my constituency. The constituency of Northwest St. Elizabeth is seeing its best days now. I have a meeting with my councillors, management team, supervisors, and key functionaries once per month. Everyone. We are pleased with the developments that have been taking place in the constituency since 2016. As everyone was aware, we were starved for resources prior to 2016. And Mr. Speaker, we now have water pipes laid from the well at Whitehall up to Newmarket. Over 100 students have graduated through the HEART program this year, and another 200 will start the program in September. A robust electrification program is currently being pursued in a number of districts. The road programs have brought great relief to residents of many communities across the constituency. Mr. Speaker, the cannabis industry is fast becoming an important aspect of the local economy among Maroons of a compound via the Alternate Development Program. However, the process is timed by uncertainty among these traditional ganja farmers who complain of the Cannabis Licensing Authority's continuous shifting of the goalposts. As one of the two communities selected for the Alternate Development Pilot Project, it is a common sentiment among the stakeholders that rather than facilitate, the CLA appears to be frustrating the progress of the program. As one whose constituency it is in, I have to be very concerned with what is taking place. Mr. Speaker, agriculture has always been the backbone of Northwest St. Elizabeth, and we have a major project coming soon. Agriculture needs a renaissance, a renewal. There needs to be a total transformation of the sector in order to confront the systemic challenges that confront it. Mr. Speaker, we are in the process of addressing and redressing those challenges. Mr. Speaker, the continuous cry from the farmers for a market to be provided for most of their crops has been getting louder. They have been suffering at the hands of the predial thieves. The cost of inputs, especially seeds, are exorbitant. The large amount of produce that is left to rot in the field is sometimes more than what they are able to sell. And this is due to lack of a market. Financing for the young entrepreneurs is absent. We are importing produce like carrot, Irish potato, red peas, gungo, onion and cantaloupe, all of which can be grown right here in Jamaica so that we can be self-sufficient. And every rural MP is hearing the cry. There is no structured distribution of produce throughout the island. Mr. Speaker, you will find that there will be breadfruit and mangoes in the east spoiling and scarcity in the west. At the same time, you will find a similar glut of carrots, scallion and thyme in the west and none in the east. And when there is a scarcity in a particular local, the cost of produce skyrockets. Mr. Speaker, while the production of the traditional crops has been declining, there is very little utilization of these lands. Despite significant inputs from this government, many farm roads remain in a deplorable state, causing many farmers to abandon their cultivation in some areas. The Agricultural Extension Service is woefully lacking in personnel. There is an average of one extension officer to service 2,000 farmers. Mr. Speaker, despite acknowledging the sector as integral to the growth agenda of the country, successive governments have not given agriculture the significant support as pride of place it deserves to drive the growth in the economy. The iniquity of the past arrangement in the sugar industry needs to be fixed now to bring equity and tangible participation to our farmers in their agricultural development. That is to say, we need to embrace properly and control the allocation and redistribution as we execute the divestment of these large tracts of land on a shared economy basis. Mr. Speaker, after the maximum acreage required to satisfy the economy of scale is established for the throughput at a factory, the remaining available land should be leased to qualified farmers within the shared economy concept. We need to be on the cutting edge of innovation to be competitive in the global sphere. Farmers have to take agriculture as a business, and we need to eliminate the gimme handout mentality. Mr. Speaker, in this rapidly changing world, the culture and structure of agriculture in Jamaica has not changed in the past 25 years. The time is now, and it has to be technology-driven. This year is the year for the Jamaica agricultural revolution. It is now or never for us to lay the foundation of a structured agricultural sector. We have been speaking about it for years, and now is the time for real action. There has been a piecemeal approach in the development of the sector. All the various disjointed aspects have to be pulled together into one coordinated system. Mr. Speaker, while our food import bill in 2018 was a whopping $902 million for the corresponding period, Jamaica exported just over 217 million of agricultural products. There is far more room for improvement. The same old cannot continue. Mr. Speaker, this agricultural revolution will be focused on increased production and productivity, infrastructure development, innovation, value chain enhancement, greater linkages, development of markets, climate smart agriculture, technology transfer, stemming rural-urban drift, and wealth creation. This new approach can only be achieved through a sustained and focused program of support and engagement by the ministry along with private sector investments. Mr. Speaker, the essential role of agriculture in the attainment of national and economic development necessitates the need for the modernization of the sector in a systemic and productive manner. The agricultural sector has been particularly vulnerable to external shocks, the most important of which is the weather. With the government's trust for economic growth and the linkages of the agricultural sector, this sector can be one of the major engines of growth for Jamaica. The capital budget which has been made available to the Ministry for Agricultural Development over the years has never been sufficient to meet the objectives as set out in the agricultural sector plan. The ministry has had to be responding to the frequent occurrence of natural disasters. Mr. Speaker, in the last 25 years, the sector has suffered direct losses in excess of $30 billion from hurricane damage alone. The ministry with direct responsibility for agriculture has always tried to respond to these occurrences. However, the absence of dedicated funds has hampered its ability to respond adequately and in a timely manner. Mr. Speaker, as a result, potential gains which could have been achieved in the sector have been starved of the necessary resources for their development. This, along with the inherent risk in agriculture, has caused a long-term systematic hampering of investment and growth in the sector. Mr. Speaker, as you are aware, in recent years, the budgetary support for capital spending within the sector has been declining, both in real and nominal terms, despite the support from international development partners. Inconsistency in the year-to-year allocation of funds to the ministry's capital program affect the ability of the ministry to plan and implement its programs and projects in a strategic and systematic manner. Mr. Speaker, we propose the establishment and operation of an agricultural development fund, which would provide the much-needed impetus for immediate and sustained improvements in the agricultural sector. The structure to underpin its sustainability and the support for investments. It is also recognized that legislations have allowed several agencies within the ministry to impose a cess on the importation of agricultural commodities. And also user and licensing fees have been imposed on local producers and dealers of locally produced agricultural production. These charges and fees have been designed to provide operational and developmental financing for the individual agency. This has created an imbalance and disparity in the quantitative and qualitative rate of development between agencies within the same ministry. For example, the Jamaica Dairy Development Board and JACRA both have been financed by a cess regime with surplus funds expended without intricate policy oversight. The Bureau of Standards has collected a cess on all fresh, semi-processed and processed agricultural commodities imported into Jamaica under the name of a standards compliance fee. Mr. Speaker, it is being proposed that there be a repeal of the sections of the various acts that empower the various public bodies in agriculture to collect cesses and or user fees or licensing fees from importers and local producers, and enact one single body for the imposition and collection of cesses for agricultural development. This ADF, Agricultural Development Fund, is intended to be a sustainable source of funding to support the implementation of critical, commercial, and development-oriented activities in the agricultural sector. The ADF aims to improve productivity in the sector, enhance the competitiveness of local farmers, and provide development financing to develop, repair, and maintain the physical infrastructure of the agricultural sector. The fund is also intended to bolster the research and technical extension capacity of the ministry to dispense technology-driven solutions to the sector, provide low-cost, low-funding to clearly identifiable, high-yielding and profitable agricultural ventures, and develop and maintain of the value chain. Mr. Speaker, the ministry's farm road program has been causing some amount of concern among farmers. We have now changed the structure of the program. MPs, councillors, farmers' organizations who would like a road to be rehabilitated should make their request to their RADA parish manager in writing. The extension officer for that area will then go and do preliminary assessment of the roads to ascertain the level of agricultural production in the area. This information is then sent to the local RADA Parish Advisory Board, who then determines which roads can be done based on the funding allocated to the parish. This recommendation is then sent to the RADA National Board for approval. Mr. Speaker, we have found where roads have been submitted and they are not farm roads, and this slows down the process of implementation. And I don't want to get into the naming of any of them, but some of the roads sent in by some, it has been one where it is not going where it is supposed to go. And I will leave it at there. With this, I am saying to some of you, it is better if you say nothing than for me to go further with what I am saying, and I hope some of us understand. I am saying let some of us be mum. Mr. Speaker, with this current structure, there is transparency and accountability for the project. We are also in the process of establishing a memorandum of understanding with the municipal corporations to oversee the road work done in their respective parishes. Mr. Speaker, feudal larceny is one of the main deterrents to persons interested in entering the agricultural sector. We will soon be bringing to Cabinet the Agricultural Produce Act, which will see the fines for anyone convicted increased to a maximum of $3 million or 6 months at hard labor. There will be restitution where the farmer will be reimbursed for their loss. This would be in addition to the fine imposed by the court. Mr. Speaker, new crops will be added to the schedule of crops to include bamboo, castor bean, cannabis, and hemp. We intend to have invoice books complementing the present receipt books for farmers when selling their produce. Farmers sometimes sell their goods on credit, but still have to give the purchaser a receipt, which puts him at a disadvantage if the purchaser lacks integrity. And I think everybody will understand when the pig farmers sell their pigs and they have to get a receipt, and still they have not collected the money. When an invoice is prepared, the farmer will indicate the terms of the sale, therefore safeguarding the transaction. Mr. Speaker, we are once again appealing for the removal of general consumption tax on seeds, forks, hoes, and refrigerated trucks. Mr. Speaker, when we look at a pack of hybrid cucumber, this pack alone costs $2,836.38. If somebody is going to plant an acre, it will cost them $5,672 for this. This one, which is tomato, this pack costs $7,986. To plant 1 acre, it is going to cost the farmer $31,946. With GCT, we have to take GCT off of these seeds that we have. Mr. Speaker, we need to work on taking it off. Mr. Speaker, we are promoting a number of non-traditional crops through RADA. The iced potato and onion program are well established. We are now having programs developed for red peas, cassava, dasheen, ginger, garlic, castor bean, sweet potato, pineapple, strawberry, sweet yam, and bamboo. And we are aware of the alternate development program for cannabis. Mr. Speaker, there are genuine concerns that have been raised from growers in the cannabis industry about the production of hemp in Jamaica. We have a technical team researching the possibility of these two crops coexisting without detriment to one another by pollination issues. Hemp is a very versatile, legally grown crop, and it has the potential to provide many value-added products. The demand for its oil is growing rapidly in other countries. Mr. Speaker, bamboo is said to be another industrial crop within the agricultural landscape of Jamaica. Recent figures from the bamboo industry, the Association of Jamaica, indicates that over the last 2 years, roughly $65 million was invested in the sector. A local company located in St. Catherine, Eco Pulp and Paper Limited, will employ directly 200 persons in the factory and another 300 to be employed indirectly in the fields, in transportation as well as sales, local and overseas of the finished product. Mr. Speaker, another bamboo project is set for Long Pond in Trelawney by the company Caribbean Bamboo Pulp and Paper Limited. This investment represents a total of $26 billion to be invested within 2 years. 36 billion within 2 years. Mr. Speaker, 30% of the required material will be planted by the company, and the remaining 70% to be supplied from local farmers via the shared economy. That is, the factory will have 30% that they are going to plant, and they are making sure that farmers, the small farmers, will be planting the other 70% to supply the factory. There is also a bamboo project set for Friendship in Hanover as a joint venture with the ministry, the Bamboo Industry Association of Jamaica, the Western Visionary Group, and the local Chinese embassy to develop a commercial demonstration facility for the production of bamboo products to replace the plastic and styrofoam we currently use. And I just want to say to you that these are some of the products from bamboo which are going to be provided by these factories that we have here out of bamboo, and of course bamboo straw. We have various types of bamboo straw. This is another one, and everybody here will be getting one of the samples so that you can have it, knowing that bamboo is the way to go in the future. Yes. Mr. Speaker, there are thousands of acres of government-owned lands that remain idle throughout the island. Since 2016, we have been engaging small farmers to cultivate some of these properties. Most of the lands leased to date are in the parishes of Portland and St. Mary, accounting for roughly 2,900 acres in these two parishes. There are thousands of acres also in South Manchester, where we intend to lease land to small farmers to grow a variety of crops, including castor bean. Castor is one of the three emerging crops, along with bamboo and cannabis. And castor bean can be grown on any type of soil and fetches a high price as Jamaica black castor. We'll be clearing also 500 acres of government land in Manchester, St. Mary, and St. Elizabeth to assist small farmers in cash crop production. Mr. Speaker, the jury is out among agriculturists regarding the profit earned per acre by small farmers with 5 to 20 acres versus the large companies, individuals, or organizations cultivating 100 or more acres of land. I am of the view that anyone who cultivates 100 acres or more will not have a greater yield per acre with respect to the degree of unit efficiency than the individual with 5 to 20 acres in our Jamaica culture. In other words, I am saying that those small farmers with 5 to 20 acres, they are able to make a bigger profit than those persons who are cultivating 100 acres or more. And I can bear that out, and I can prove it to anyone who wants to challenge me on that. Mr. Speaker, small and medium-sized farmers have been the ones buttressing the agricultural sector over the years. They have been very efficient with the small acreages they have been working on. I say, provide them with the modern technology and they will outperform large farms. Mr. Speaker, the first port of call is the restructuring of RADA. At present, we have more persons in offices than we have on the ground. There are 128 extension officers for roughly 220,000 farmers, with a total staff complement of 520 persons, and RADA is supposed to be the extension or training arm of the ministry. With the new structure, we will have twice the number of persons as extension officers, and also a number of specialists involved with crop and animal care, including 13 veterinarians. Mr. Speaker, part of the structuring of the sector is that emphasis will be placed on organizations. These organizations, whether it be JSPMO groups or benevolent society involved in agriculture and any other farming organization, will be registered with RADA. Farmers will operate in production zones as a group. An agricultural production zone refers to lands within a particular geographical area and are cultivated by small farmers or medium-sized farmers and are areas without irrigation or have minimum infrastructure. Agroparks. An agropark refers to lands within a geographical area, sometimes contiguous, that we have roads and water for irrigation and other infrastructure. Presently, there are 2 so-called agroparks which do not fit the description. A former PNP Minister of Agriculture said that with the agroparks, the JLP is the conceptualizer, but he is the implementer. I hope you remember who said that. Some of you will remember that the late Roger Clark. Mr. Speaker, I tell you, we find that his implementation was a disaster. There are the other agroparks that were colossal failures when they were first implemented. However, with the last 2 years, there has been a management system put in place which has seen an upturn in production in just about all of them, especially in Planted Guard Agro Park in St. Thomas. And I would like to say thanks to the Member of Parliament. He has been doing an excellent job as Shadow Minister of Agriculture, and I hope they will keep you there for many years to come. Produce from the production zones and agro-parks will be channeled to an agroeconomic zone. The establishment of agroeconomic zones is high on the agenda in the current JLP manifesto. This government is not only going to be the conceptualizer, but they will also be the implementer of the project. Mr. Speaker, don't worry, we have gone beyond the chips. We have gone technology-wise, which is further than that. Up, up, and further up. Mr. Speaker, the first agroeconomic zone will be established at Holland in St. Elizabeth. The characteristics and unique features of this Holland agroeconomic zone is that the property has 2,400 acres of arable land. This land has been divided into 5 to 10 acre blocks by Appleton. Persons have been allotted as little as 1 acre in every lot. The land is below sea level, so instead of pumping water onto the land, water has to be pumped off of the land into the Black River. One of the reasons for Campari relinquishing the lease on the property last month is because it was costing them between $800,000 and $1.5 million per month for electricity to operate the pumps that are there. There are 4 springs on the property which continue to gush water 24 hours a day. Water is also free flowing from the YS River through canals along each plot on lands. farmers on the property will use pumps to pump the free water from the canals to irrigate their holdings. Mr. Speaker, there is a local company, Holland Producers Limited, that has leased the land from SCJ and has subleased it to persons from all walks of life. They are established farmers, many from South St. Elizabeth East, small farmers, agriculturists, teachers, lecturers, security, businessmen. And all farmers will be financing their own enterprise. Nothing is going to be asked of government. Mr. Speaker, as I indicated earlier, there are a number of crops that were imported into our country last year, which we can grow right here in Jamaica. Some of the crops imported are cantaloupe, honeydew melon, broccoli, squash, zucchini, cauliflower, etc. The farmers at Holland intend to advise MICAF to cease the importation of these crops, as they intend to supply the local market, including the hotels, with the amount currently imported from the Holland agroeconomic zone. There are other crops, the importation of which the farmers intend to reduce, and these include garlic, red peas, Congo peas, Irish potato, onions, sweet potato, and pineapple. Mr. Speaker, 30 acres of land has been reserved for youth and 25 acres reserved for women. The youth and women have already been identified and their land allocated. All of them are budding entrepreneurs, but they do not have the capital to establish their own activity. So they will be facilitated through the Agricultural Push Start program, where they are provided with all the inputs upfront and the costs taken out at the point of sale by the company in charge of the project. Mr. Speaker, the entire property will be fenced with barbed wire. There will be 6 entrances to the property, which will be monitored by security guards, floodlights, and security cameras at each entrance. 2 drones will be used to monitor activities on the property. Mr. Speaker, one of the problems that Campari also faced was cows that went onto the property to destroy their cane. So that is why we have to fence it and monitor it. The expense for security, cleaning up drains, electricity, and lease to the farmer is $2,100 per acre per month, or $25,200 per acre per year. That is what it's going to cost them, nothing more. Mr. Speaker, it is estimated that 1 million kilograms of produce will be reaped from the property at a value of $1.26 billion by the end of this year. There will also be an online marketing platform to link farmers directly with hotels and exporters. Mr. Speaker, the Airport Authority of Jamaica is planning to expand the existing airstrip by taking in a total of 480 acres of land to facilitate the landing of cargo planes. The runway will be upgraded to 6,000 feet, and I would like to thank the minister who is facilitating this. Mr. Speaker, the plan is to create a local hub for the export of fresh and processed produce. We are also exploring the possibility of domestic flights to bring passengers to the various tourist attractions in the parish, such as YS Falls, Appleton Tour, Lover's Leap, and of Bamboo Avenue, which is right there. The farm itself would also be an agro-tourism attraction. Educational tours are also being proposed for the property. The farmers, Mr. Speaker, are also looking to have a catastrophe fund program being worked out to assist the farmers on the property in times of need. Many of the farmers have already bought into the program. Mr. Speaker, to assist in our climate change mitigation effort, each roadway on the property will be planted with different kinds of fruit trees. The Holland Agro-Economic Zone project is slated to be the largest agricultural project established in Jamaica, which involves so many farmers establishing such a large acreage of land at any one time. Mr. Speaker, the complex is one where there is going to be grading, packaging, processing, cold storage. All produce grown by the farmers would be bought, grade A going to the hotels and export market, grade B going to the local market, grade C, which is usually left in the field but good, will be processed into puree and juice and going into value-added products. The trash from the products would be sold as feed or fertilizer. Mr. Speaker, we have the investors who intended to build out this complex with us here in the gallery today. The investors are here, and I would like to thank Mr. Robert Thompson and his partners who are here. Their company is called Outer One, and I applaud them for coming on board to invest in this project. Mr. Speaker, we have been talking about a school feeding program for years, but nothing concrete has been implemented. My concentration has been always been on a breakfast program. I started a breakfast program involving the schools in my constituency of Northwest St. Louis some 9 years ago. The problem with the program was that it was costly to transport the produce from different parts of the island. And my good friend from Central knows about it. We have now in place a committee for each school whereby they are come together with the RADA Extension Officer, the school's 4-H, Parent Teachers Association, Agricultural Organization, and the main functions of the committee is headed by 4-H leader is to maintain the school garden and to channel the produce from the school garden as well as produce from the local farmers into the school's breakfast and lunch program on a consistent basis.
The member's time for speaking has expired. House Leader.
Another 10 hours.
Mr. Speaker, I ask that the member's time be extended sufficient to allow him to complete his presentation. And he may, at the rate he's going, he might need an extension to that as well. But for now, we will just deal with the extension to allow him to complete his presentation.
Those in favor? Aye. Those against? Ayes have it. Mr. Hutchinson?
You don't understand one word you said so far. You don't understand one word so far.
Mr. Speaker, the Holland Agro-Economic Zone will be providing most of the raw material and value-added products for the schools in the constituency. The management of the complex will coordinate the food chain so that there is consistency in the supply of the various food items. Most of the farmers have already pledged a certain amount of produce to the program free of cost. As a result, fruit juice will be sold at the same price as the bag juice. And we are looking to get rid of the bag juice out of the school feeding program. And I am saying with the agroeconomic zone, it is going to facilitate the process. Mr. Speaker, it is hoped that by next year the program can be expanded to the rest of the schools in the parish. The breakfast program in the constituency saw an increase in attendance at schools, and the grades of the students also increased greatly. Now, it is one where I explain that the cost of transporting the raw material from all parts of the island, it was very expensive. Now that we have the agroeconomic zone, where it will be grown right there, we will then be able to supply it on a consistent basis and supply throughout the country. And you are well aware of the program. So that is where we are going to go. And so that is why we can now provide the juice, where many of the farmers have said that they will give the produce free of cost for the school feeding program. So it will cost the same amount as the bag juice or even less. The Holland agroeconomic zone and others to come will be game changers in Jamaica's agricultural sector. There is a private investor that will be setting up another one in Clarendon before year end. We are also having discussions for one to be established in St. Thomas. Megamart development at Bernal Lodge will also be marketing produce from farmers in the surrounding area, as well as other parts of the parish of St. Catherine and the parish of Clarendon. They also have an outlet for their raw produce through their supermarkets. And I just want to say, Mr. Chairman, although I am one who is against constructing block and steel on any good agricultural land, we have to be looking at the bigger picture, where those developments will bring greater economic benefit for the country as a whole. Mr. Speaker, with the developments such as these, we are no longer looking for a single-digit growth within the sector. I am predicting agricultural growth of no less than 25% annually. Very ambitious. It has been done already, and it can be done again under the Jamaica Labour Party. It was done between 2008 and 2011, and you are aware. I have outlined, Mr. Speaker, in some detail a project which a big company has given up because of various challenges. These persons leasing the Holland land are not big investors. These are small, local entrepreneurs who are now given the opportunity to invest in agriculture and be part of this rock that we have here. They have a vision of becoming millionaires out of this project and have taken it on with zeal and gusto to make it a success. I'm requesting that the Ministry of Finance provide funding through the Agricultural Competitiveness Program in MICAF, so the training and other requirements can be implemented to have the project HACCP and GAP certified. Mr. Speaker, the benefits that an agroeconomic zone will bring to the agricultural sector, and by extension growth for the economy, some of which have not been mentioned, are many. It will provide a structure in the agricultural sector to move produce from the farmer to the value chain, facilitate a competitive, reliable, and sustainable supply of produce, provision of additional income for hundreds of farmers, enhancement of the development of the value chain, curtail the importation of a number of crops, and decrease the importation of others, provide an opportunity for the small farmers to become entrepreneurs. It will help eliminate glut and shortage of produce. Mr. Speaker, I have presented to you a template for the divestment of government lands. This Holland Agro-Economic Zone project is an example of small farmers working within a group to change the complexion of an industry. We do not only have to think big, but with vision and purpose driven by technological development. Mr. Speaker, there is no culture without agriculture. Mr. Speaker, I could not close this presentation without reference to the current drought being experienced island-wide and its impact on our farmers. We are addressing this matter, Mr. Speaker, and I hope the opposition is not interested. Through RADA, the ministry will be providing urgently needed direct assistance to farmers of $15 million to assist with immediate relief, while proper assessment is being done to determine further assistance or interventions. Under the ministry's production incentive program, a further $19.9 million is to be allocated via the members of parliament to provide further inputs to support our genuine farmers. I don't hear many people clapping over there, so it means that very soon, coming up, Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank my very efficient, enthusiastic, and creative support staff at the ministry. I wish to thank the various agencies of MICAF, RADA, and the Jamaica 4-H Club. I wish to acknowledge unfailing support and enthusiasm of the Bureau of Standards. I wish to thank JP Foods for their creativity in leading the charge for such delicious value-added products. Your St. Mary line especially has brought brand Jamaica to the taste buds of those far away for your fresh produce. I would like to say to everyone, there is a bag of goodies on the outside for each parliamentarian. In them, you will find some Jamaican finest value-added products. That is why, with that, I say grow what you eat what you can, and can what you can't. Mr. Speaker, the Jamaica Labour Party under the Most Honorable Edward Seaga, and now under our Most Honorable Prime Minister Andrew Holness, is a visionary government. It is the conceptualizing government. It is the government with sustainable implementing projects. It is the government for the small entrepreneurs. It is the government that brings into sharp focus the plans, programs, and projects that will bring prosperity to our people. The Jamaica Labour Party government has the tenacity and the stick-to-itiveness to move Jamaica forward. Mr. Speaker, this is a government that encourages everyone to hold on to their beliefs. A government that remains committed to the upliftment of its people and the growth and development of our country. May God continue to bless our beloved country as we grow in love, harmony, and prosperity.
House Leader. Hilton is next. Oh. Mr. Hilton. Mr. Hilton. Mr. Hilton. Come up here.
Mr. Speaker, may I have permission to speak from a seat other than my own?
You are permitted to.
Much obliged, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, all praises to the Almighty for continuing health and strength. As usual, as I begin my presentation, I have several persons to thank, Mr. Speaker, for their continuing support. My wife, Judith, and daughter, Nile, and I must say they are not here today as they're traveling, but in their absence, I have to pay my due regards. My immediate support staff, Roxanne Brown at my law firm, Grace Barrett, the constituency secretary, as well as my security and my driver, and other staff member, Ms. Johnson and others who are at the office. Importantly, the great constituents of Western St. Andrew, who continue to support me and the People's National Party, they have never failed to support the PNP at the polls, at every election and election contested, and they are ready for the next one whenever it is called. Yeah. Members of my task force for assisting in my preparation, some of whom are here present today. My three councillors, Mrs. Hazel Anderson, Byron Clark, and Norman Perry, for their support in good and bad times. My constituency executive members, again, some of whom are here today. And I'd like to give special recognition to Opposition Leader Dr. Peter Phillips for his wise leadership and commitment to the party and Jamaican people in good and bad times. And to you, Mr. Speaker, or the Deputy, for your own dedication to duty and to the proper functioning of this Honourable House. I wish for you continuing blessing and your own portion of wisdom as to guide the work of this chamber. Mr. Speaker, the National Development Plan, outlined in Vision 2030, represents the policy framework for moving Jamaica to developed country status in the next 11 years. Is this a pie in the sky, or will we be able to achieve our stated objective in the given time frame? The answer to this question, Mr. Speaker, lies primarily with the administration of the day, but from my vantage point, as the Shadow Minister for National Development and Physical Planning, with oversight responsibility of the UDC, Special Economic Zones, and the National Housing Trust, I say that we are in the best position we have ever been to achieve or come close to achieving our target. It is a fact that our economy is realizing the longest period of growth in decades and its highest growth rate in several years, though still less than needed. We have achieved low levels of interest rates, inflation, and unemployment not seen in several decades. Government debt to GDP ratio is the lowest in decades, with improved credit ratings for our country and institutions. We have managed to achieve this holy grail, Mr. Speaker, through the hard work and sacrifices of our several stakeholders, including the mass of the Jamaican people, the private sector, civil society organizations, international partners, and last but not least, successive administrations formed by both the PNP and JLP. Mr. Speaker, the role played by our international partners in the IMF, the World Bank, and IADB in enforcing fiscal discipline while helping to design and implement the structural reforms cannot and should not be underestimated. Indeed, I believe their role to be decisive without any diminution of the leadership roles played by our various prime ministers, finance ministers, including Dr. Peter Phillips and his effort that is well known, in driving the various policies, plans, and programs across various administrations. But we are in danger of squandering the hard-won gains of this period, which represents our collective hopes of achieving Vision 2030. Mr. Speaker, all well-thinking Jamaicans across gender, religion, or party affiliation must be concerned about the antisocial behavior reflected in our crime statistics and in the several acts of corruption currently being investigated by law enforcement, the Auditor General, or the oversight role of the parliamentary committees. This should serve as a reminder to all of us, Mr. Speaker, that the maintenance of sound ethical values and enduring attitudes continue to elude our society, requiring visionary leadership at all levels of the political, social, and economic spectrum. Keeping the focus on our opportunity to achieve Vision 2030, Mr. Speaker, I observe that this administration, in anticipation of the ending of the standby program with the IMF and wanting to engender continuing confidence in its economic policy of fiscal responsibility and independent oversight, has moved to enhance the independent monitoring capability with its proposal to replace the EPOC with a new fiscal council. Mr. Speaker, the administration understands the risks to its fiscal and economic plans and programs going forward, and has taken the prudent measures to mitigate those risks, especially in the absence of an IMF program with only its Article 4 monitoring and oversight. What are the similar risks on the physical or spatial planning side of the economic program, Mr. Speaker? The absence of an updated and functionally relevant national spatial plan represents a serious threat to Jamaica achieving its Vision 2030 goal. Mr. Speaker, there is broad consensus in the planning community and among other professional groupings, as well as the construction industry, that the spatial plans of both the Norman Manley and Siaga era of the 1950s and 70s are outdated and in urgent need of updating. This is so, Mr. Speaker, even if the Manley Plan of the 1950s continues to drive the debate around the development of the National Heroes Park and the location of the proposed new Parliament buildings and the government campus currently being pursued by this administration. The current efforts in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation to develop a national spatial plan leaves much to be desired. Both in its design and development, the exercise is deficient and, if achieved, will be wholly ineffectual and irrelevant to the task at hand, which is realizing Vision 2030. This is so for several reasons, Mr. Speaker. Firstly, the exercise repeats the inherent weaknesses of the first two national plans in that they both lack a clear national policy strategy to inform the national priorities in both the design and implementation of these plans. Therefore, the discernment of national priorities, different from sectional and private interests, could not be easily determined and led, at least in part, to the less than optimal achievement of their stated objectives. Because, Mr. Speaker, depending on the wishes of the administration of the day, the national plan will be either ignored by the various planning authorities or interpreted to suit the administration's objectives in planning outcomes. This, Mr. Speaker, has resulted in weak or no enforcement, primarily at the local level, giving rise to a plethora of land use issues and conflicts, leading to changed neighborhoods and with it the undermining of property values. This characterizes many communities in the corporate area and other urban areas and towns across Jamaica. Secondly, the absence of an architecture to govern the national physical or spatial planning process has resulted in suboptimal plans and invited conflicts between the various authorities at different levels. The efforts over the years, Mr. Speaker, to bring forward replacement legislation in place of the existing town and country planning legislation evidences some of these conflicts. Thirdly, the current effort at evolving a national spatial plan through the proposed development of 7 academic papers is not likely to overcome these challenges, where these plans rely explicitly on existing data sets and not, Mr. Speaker, on current primary data. Additionally, the lack of proper consultation with key stakeholders, including the opposition, is not likely to improve these major deficits identified herein. What then are the solutions to these deficits or challenges to our national planning process, Mr. Speaker? I believe the time for clear thinking and bold action is now. The first of the 3 deficits inherent in the current exercise at national spatial planning, I pointed out earlier in this presentation. I offer the following solutions. Firstly, on the architecture. My proposal, Mr. Speaker, is that consideration be given to the role and function of the Urban Development Corporation, or the UDC. In the year of the passing of its chief architect, the Right Honorable Edward Siaga, who envisaged a critical, if limited, role for the UDC in the implementation of the 1970 National Spatial Plan. 50 years after its establishment, Mr. Speaker, I believe the time has come to review and revise the role of the UDC and to repurpose it for its mission in changing times. Similarly, the role of the Factories Corporation should be reviewed, revised, and repurposed in light of current realities. Mr. Speaker, specifically, I'm proposing that the UDC and the FCJ be the subject of a thoroughgoing review with the objective of merging aspects of these 2 agencies to form the National Physical Planning Authority, which, along with the planning function currently being done by NEPA under the Town and Country Planning Act, be subsumed by this proposed new planning authority. In furtherance of this objective, Mr. Speaker, I'm proposing that a review commission be established, similar to that which reviews the NHT Act, to examine this proposal, and the opposition stands ready to assist in the drawing up of the necessary terms of reference. My proposal, Mr. Speaker, is not fully aligned with the Honourable Prime Minister's own observation in his budget presentation just ended, in which the Prime Minister said then, and I quote, "We are able to do all of what we are doing and all of what we plan to do." This is in regard to a proposed new infrastructure development program. Because, he continues, we are under one ministry, the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, where all agencies necessary to achieve the objective of physical and economic planning reside. End quote. Mr. Speaker, I only have to observe that in the same presentation, you appropriately, or the Prime Minister appropriately apologized to those who have been inconvenienced by these works. And quoting the Prime Minister, he said, "As I said earlier, there's much room for improvement. We ask for your continued support and understanding." End of quote. We in the opposition, Mr. Speaker, disagree that the debacle in the implementation of the major works in the corporate area is simply an inconvenience. The truth is that significant damage has been done to several businesses in the affected areas. There has been tremendous loss of man-hours, reduction in production and productivity, and all this, ironically, at a time when we need to increase the country's GDP and accelerate economic growth. We believe, Mr. Speaker, and it has been stated by the leader of the opposition, that potential claims against the government lie as a result of siloed planning and patently poor implementation. Nor do we agree, Mr. Speaker, that the serious congestion and problems experienced by several communities and businesses caused by the simultaneous implementation of multiple projects in major corridors of the corporate area results simply from previously signed contracts with China-related institutions by the PNP administration, as stated by the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, it is simply not our experience as to how friendly sovereign governments deal with another cooperating sovereign nation, especially after a change of administration through the democratic process, that necessary adjustments to obligations undertaken by the previous administration in office could or would not be entertained or responded to upon request and negotiation. In fact, I only have to point to the subsequent changes to the South Coast Highway project that was conducted by the administration. On the policy strategy, Mr. Speaker, the second solution to the deficits identified in the current national spatial planning effort is the clear need for a policy strategy to guide the new proposed physical planning authority in order to achieve the goals of Vision 2030. Where we do agree with the Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, is the continuing need for a third infrastructure development program as successor to the soon concluded Major Infrastructure Development Program, or MIDP2, as the program has come to be called. While there is not no alignment on the details of such a program, we do note from the Prime Minister's recent budget presentation that the program broadly outlined carries forward the concept of the logistics-centered economy articulated as part of the Global Logistics Sub-Initiative launched by the previous PNP administration and supported by the Jamaica Logistics Hub Master Plan, Market Analysis, Market and Industry Analysis. Mr. Speaker, the Master Plan was tabled in this Honourable House in 2017, though not debated here or anywhere else, and was subsequently declared a national priority by the administration. In this context, we take note of the Prime Minister's admission that, and I quote, "The second phase of major infrastructure development is based on technical recommendations, our economic development plan, and climate-smart consideration, such as our master drainage plan," end quote. Further, Mr. Speaker, there is broad alignment with the need to incorporate the upgraded or restoration works to bring light railway solutions to passenger operations as an economical option to multimodal transport within and between urban centers, end quote. Mr. Speaker, I would suggest that not only the passenger aspects of light railway project be considered, but that the railway cargo as well as the aviation cargo infrastructure be considered as well. Again, this approach speaks to the recognition of the logistics-centered economy as a key policy strategy for the realization of Vision 2030. So, Mr. Speaker, the focus on developing an integrated infrastructure program addressing road development, water and waste management, drainage, bridges, transportation, ICT, and smart city infrastructure is broadly supportable by the opposition. However, Mr. Speaker, in the interest of good governance and in the absence of the appropriate planning process and the established need for reform of our existing planning institutions and regulations, the opposition strongly recommends an appropriate consultation process to underpin the development of the national priorities under the proposed next phase of the MIDP to be called the Greater Infrastructure Development Program that is even now being developed. Mr. Speaker, there seems to be clear alignment of government and the opposition that the policy strategy best suited for achieving Vision 2030 is the logistics-centered approach to planning. This approach is further supported by the long and successful experience of Singapore and other major logistic hubs present in Dubai and Rotterdam, even in our neighbor, Panama. More recently, Mr. Speaker, is the 2019-2020 budget presented to the Indian Parliament by the new Minister of Finance in her maiden presentation, on which several informed commentators, in reviewing the highlights of the budget, stated, and I quote, "Good news was in store for the transport, logistics, and shipping industries, as the Minister proposed a massive push to all forms of physical connectivity. Industrial corridors, dedicated freight corridors, state road networks to be developed in the second phase of the project were among the highlights that will benefit the industries," end of quote. The commentary continued, Mr. Speaker. The ambitious program would help develop national road corridors and highways while enhancing port connectivity through modernization. These initiatives will improve logistics tremendously, reducing the cost of transportation and increasing the competitiveness of domestically produced goods. End of quote. Mr. Speaker, like India, Singapore, Rotterdam, and Dubai, our concept of a logistics-centered economy is similarly aimed at increasing competitiveness, connectivity, and productivity. Importantly, it also addresses the increased trade deficit currently being experienced by our country and which represents a threat to economic growth. And the third of these weaknesses of the current planning is the imperative of data. Mr. Speaker, the third area of weakness of the current national spatial planning process is a chronic data problem which has dogged the proper planning of our economic development. The absence of appropriate data sets has served to undermine medium to long-term planning and effective decision-making at all levels of government and the private sector regarding our economic, cultural, social, and environmental development. Key to the solution to this problem, Mr. Speaker, are decisions regarding pending legislation on data privacy, as well as the creation of a digital economy which will allow for the greater use of technology, such as sensors, artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, big data, blockchain, and analytics. These key technologies will not only transform the supply chain and logistics industry, but will also have a positive impact on Jamaica's logistics and transportation industry, both from a business and connectivity perspective. Mr. Speaker, admittedly, the fourth industrial revolution, driven by the digital economy and the integration of new technologies, will yield the data necessary to support the reform of the planning process and the logistics-centered economy as a key policy strategy for achieving the desired outcomes of the National Development Plan, together with the Jamaica Logistics Hub Initiative, Market Analysis, and Master Plan. Mr. Speaker, it is worthy of note that the Logistics Hub Master Plan calls for some $28 billion United States dollars of investments in the various projects outlined in the Master Plan, and the employment of over 80,000 persons directly and more than 400,000 indirect jobs, and utilizing several thousand hectares of lands spread across Jamaica. Many of these investments, Mr. Speaker, will be located in the special economic zones in response to the significant fiscal and operational incentives provided to developers and occupants of the zones as defined in the SEZ legislation and regulations. Mr. Speaker, far from being a pipe dream or a hoax perpetuated on the Jamaican people, as was said by one of the members on that side, the number of cases evidencing success in the implementation of the hub so far has been quite impressive. Continuing modernization of the KCT in accordance with the concession agreement with CMA CGM, continuing expansion of near-port logistics centers or warehouses by the Port Authority of Jamaica, Kingston Wharf's Logistics Center and Auto Logistics Operations, Gisco Alumina Industrial and Commercial Park in St. Elizabeth, the Vernon Field Aerotropolis. And here, Mr. Speaker, I strongly believe that greater efforts must be made to develop this consensus project, along with the supportive infrastructure such as a town center. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, I believe that Vernon Field represents a greater priority than the misadventure at Bernard Lodge. Nestle Distribution Center at Ferry in my constituency, with plans for further expansion in the local coffee industry and manufacturing sector. The warehouse construction operation at the Ferry Park, which will enhance domestic logistics and supply chains. 876 Logistics Limited, to implement an eco-industrial and logistics park project in Seaview Gardens to attract major investment in an SEZ planned for the Seaview Gardens on lands near to the existing port of Kingston. The Kingston Dry Dock Facilities, a joint venture operation between German and Jamaican interests to provide ship repair operations in the Kingston Harbor. And of course, the Caymanas SEZ is very advanced in its planning to develop a commercial, residential, and university campus and a logistics park on several hundred acres of lands adjoining the improved Mandela Highway and in proximity to the North-South Highway. A dedicated access route to the Port of Kingston is recommended by the Logistics Hub Master Plan. An announcement by this government, as to its development partner is being eagerly awaited. So, Mr. Speaker, there are other private developments at varying stages of development that seeks to implement the logistics operations. Other reforms of the bureaucracy aimed aiding the logistics-centered economy are as follows. The continuing implementation of a port community system to increase efficiency at the port and to better coordinate stakeholder functioning at the port, together with the Asikuda World System being implemented by Customs, forms the backbone of a single electronic window platform aimed at integrating the several ICT operations at the port and to enhance efficiency and productivity. The Trade Information Portal, or TIP, will coordinate the disparate sources of information flow concerning Jamaica's trade agreements and the steps needed to conduct effective trading with Jamaica. The portal, Mr. Speaker, was recently launched and is housed at the Trade Board, which has the responsibility of updating the system. The tabling of the new Customs Act in the Houses of Parliament at the last sitting should have broad implications for facilitating the ease and speed of doing export and import business over the port. The Custom Bill, Mr. Speaker, we suggest is to be subjected to joint parliamentary hearings to help in the public participation in and knowledge of the operations of the proposed reform bill. The announcement recently of the signing of the draft trade agreement between the European Union and Mercosur trading blocs, given Jamaica's and CARICOM's current EPA agreement with the EU, should enhance frictionless trade between these two major trading blocs, with Jamaica being able to play a key role in the supply chain and logistics operations between these two large trading blocs. Mr. Speaker, these developments demonstrate that the conditions being created to bring about the development of Jamaica as a logistic hub or gateway to the Americas and beyond is indeed not a hoax or pipe dream, but a fast approach in reality that can be enhanced by the adoption of the logistics-centered economy as the policy strategy for implementing and achieving Vision 2030. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to my constituency, Western St. Andrew. Mr. Speaker, much of the constituency lies below sea level in normal times, but it's...
Members' time for speaking has expired. House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, if you don't mind, I just want to remind my honourable friend that the debate on the constituency matters will commence in September. He has shifted...
That's why I have a very brief.
We never had it the last year.
So this is constituent. So I don't know if he... I don't know if he intends to take up the extended time to deal with a matter that is not before us.
Calling.
Nonetheless, the member may complete his presentation with the time that it is necessary to do that. But try to make it as short because you get a second bite of the cherry.
Those in favor? Those against? Ayes have it. Mr. Hilton.
Much obliged, Mr. Speaker and my colleagues. Mr. Speaker, much of the constituency, as I said, lie below sea level in normal times, but is under the constant threat of sea level rise due to the advance in climate change and its implications for the residents of Seaview Gardens, Riverton Meadows, Callaloo Mews, and New Haven. Mr. Speaker, the geographic location of these communities ensures that the gullies and drains located in these communities are constantly being blocked by debris moving largely from the upper reaches of St. Andrew and deposited in these communities. The failure of successive administrations to fund a proper maintenance and repair program to clean, upgrade these drains and gullies has placed these communities at risk of businesses being flooded, especially those along Spanish Town Road in the vicinity of 6 Mile, moving towards 3 miles. Homes and schools in these communities are not spared. Additionally, the heightened risk of waterborne diseases, together with mosquito-borne outbreaks of viruses, present a constant danger to the population in these communities. We are therefore, Mr. Speaker, quite pleased to hear the budget announcement by the Most Honourable Prime Minister that a master drainage plan is being considered or developed. I use this opportunity to urge the administration to fast-track the planning and funding of this badly needed project to alleviate the risks faced on a daily basis by these community residents. Of particular concern, Mr. Speaker, is the current state of the Sandy Gully, which has remained as shown in this slide and the pictures for several years, depicting the overgrowth of trees and the mountain of debris trapped between the trees, despite my effort to this and other gullies to be cleaned and repaired. There is a clear and present danger faced by the population in Seaview Gardens and Riverton. I'll tell you, Mr. Speaker, I made this appeal to the Prime Minister through this medium, as other efforts to have the drains and gullies cleaned and repaired has not been addressed. Most recently, the constituency was allocated $1 million to carry out mitigation works, the same amount or less than the other constituencies in the corporate area, with far less gullies and drains than exist in Western St. Andrew. This is iniquitous, Mr. Speaker, iniquitous. Mr. Speaker, even as we await the implementation of the master plan, the master drainage plan, I request that additional funds be identified to mitigate the risk to these communities on a priority basis. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, the implication for the Port of Kingston and Hunts Bay that is currently being considered for a major industrial project, of these vast quantities of trees and garbage flowing from the Duane River and the Sandy Gully, plus other smaller gullies into the Hunts Bay and eventually the Kingston Harbour, are additional reasons for urgent action. Mr. Speaker, regarding the informal settlements of both Riverton and New Haven, a local area development plan is about to get underway for the involvement of the Community Development Committee, the University of Technology, other planning professionals, and overseas charity organizations with the objective of establishing a development plan to make these communities less vulnerable to the vagaries of both man and nature. The stakeholders intend to engage the government in its current efforts to privatize the Riverton dump to ensure that their interests are taken fully into account and protected before a deal for the dump is finalized. Ultimately, a local area development plan will address the matter of land tenure for most of the families residing in Riverton City and New Haven. Mr. Speaker, these are some of the same communities in which a state of public emergency has recently been declared. And while the residents in many, if not most, of these communities are relieved to see the strong show of force by the police and military presence in countering the lawlessness they have experienced for extended periods of time in their communities, they are as clear as I am that if the opportunity is not taken to begin to address the conditions giving rise to this situation in the first place, then it's only a matter of time before we or they are at the mercy of the youth gangs again. It is for this reason, Mr. Speaker, that as Member of Parliament for some of these communities now under the state of public emergency, I declare that I have mixed feeling about it. Happy for those feeling the sense of respite from the shootings and murders in their communities, but anxious at the same time that more than the police and military presence, other actions necessary to support these measures need to be taken simultaneously and urgently. I have spoken to a few of these today in this presentation, but time does not allow for a fuller briefing of more of the pressing issues. For these, I will be seeking audience with my neighbor and colleague, the Most Honorable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I end my presentation where I began, with an acknowledgement of the clear progress that has been made on the economic front. But I quickly note that and I quote, "Success has many parents, while failure is an orphan." To avoid the failure to which I have alluded, Mr. Speaker, we collectively must make the best use of these most favorable conditions for achieving the goals outlined in the National Development Plan or Vision 2030, together with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals 2030. Or to update or replace the previous two national physical or spatial plans of the 1950s and 70s. There is the urgent need for a clear policy strategy to inform the implementation of Vision 2030 if we are to even come close to achieving its goals with the 11-year period remaining until 2030. Opposition puts forward for consideration a review of the role and function of the UDC and or the FCJ, the Factories Corporation of Jamaica, by an appropriate high-level body, not unlike the review of the NHT, with a view to creating a national physical planning authority comprised of the requisite professional representation with the necessary policy oversight and appropriate government structure. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, the opposition puts forward for consideration the adoption of the logistics-centered economy as a policy strategy to inform the development of a new national spatial plan aimed at driving economic growth rates beyond the 2% average experienced over the last several decades. The experience of Singapore and the other global logistic hubs in attaining sustained growth rates resulting in their transformation to achieve developed country status has been truly inspiring. More recently, India's 2019 to 2020 budget, focusing on the development of its logistics infrastructure, including highways, ports, airports, bridges, warehouses, and the adoption of smart technologies, integrating ICT, is presented as further evidence of the credibility of this strategy. More importantly, Mr. Speaker, are the results of the World Bank-funded Jamaica Logistic Hub Initiative Market Analysis Master Plan, commissioned in 2014 and presented in 2017. The master plan embraces the logistics-centered economy as a central strategy and recommends the implementation of the Logistic Hub Initiative over the short, medium, and long term. Mr. Speaker, fortunately, there appears to be common ground, or at least a growing consensus, on the central role of logistics in driving a proposed new greater infrastructure development program by the government, being proposed by the government. Mr. Speaker, these developments, together with the implementation of the Special Economic Zone Authority as the implementing agency for the SEZ legislation and regulation, is further evidence of a growing consensus towards a growth strategy built around logistics. And I may just add, Mr. Speaker, that I think this Parliament should commend the SEZ Authority for recently contesting and winning for the SEZ Authority and for Jamaica the 2021 conference on special economic zones, which will be held here in Jamaica. And I think that, Mr. Speaker, speaks to the credibility of that project. Mr. Speaker, I am confident that a real consensus between government and opposition on the role of the logistics-centered economy in driving economic growth will see the acceleration of growth in the economy in the remaining 11 years, sufficient to get us to or close enough to realizing Vision 2030 with Jamaica as a place of choice to live, work, do business, and to raise families. May God bless Jamaica, land of free love.
Minute. Mrs. Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm humbled to have been granted the privilege of serving the citizens of our beloved country for another year. I'm heartened by the positive outpouring of support from members on both sides of this honorable House, as together we work to move our people from poverty to prosperity. I salute the citizens of Northeast St. Ann, whose vote of confidence propelled me to this level of national service, and by their continued support have allowed me to serve for the past 18 years. I wish to acknowledge my councillors, my 4 councillors, and the members of my executive who continue to support me as I balance my duties at the national and constituency levels. I also want to thank my family who stand with me unswervingly, and today my sister and my niece are here in the gallery. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure you will agree that the work of the Ministry of Labour and Social Security transforms and empowers the lives of those who we serve on a daily basis. The Jamaican people are at the heart of what we do. I would like to place on record my appreciation to the staff of the ministry for the quality and depth of work that they do each day. Last year, I shared the vision for a collective purpose, bolting the foundation for lasting prosperity through dignity and respect. This year, Mr. Speaker, the work continues by building on that foundation as we safeguard the values of dignity in work with true respect for all by putting the ministry in the palms of our citizens' hands. Mr. Speaker, the ministry's Mr. Speaker, Jamaica has maintained enduring relationships with our international development partners. I would like to publicly recognize and thank the Inter-American Development Bank, the World Bank, and the International Labour Organization. Special thanks to our bilateral partners, and in particular the governments of Canada, the United States, and Japan, who provide valuable technical support in the execution of our mandate. Mr. Speaker, it is no coincidence that this year marks the 100th anniversary of the ILO and the 100th anniversary of the passage of the Trade Union Act in Jamaica, 1919. Jamaica was the first in the region to pass such legislation that entrenched in law the hard-won rights and freedom of organized labor. This is a demonstration of the value and importance that we as a country place on our workers. I also honor our tripartite partners, the Jamaica Employers Federation and the Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions, who, as members of the Labour Advisory Council, play an integral role in fostering national development. The ministry would be constrained in achieving some of its objectives without the engagement and support of private sector and civil society. Mr. Speaker, the ministry's strategic priorities are in full alignment with the government's priorities of social protection, human capital development, and inclusive, sustainable job creation and economic growth. The ministry is focused on safeguarding dignity in work and will demonstrate true respect for all through technology and innovation for customer service excellence, public education and people development, and infrastructure and accessibility. In 2017, the Prime Minister, the Most Honourable Andrew Holness, gave a charge and expounded his vision for the government to improve its services and move Jamaica towards becoming a digital economy. This, he said, will aid in productivity and growth. We in the Ministry of Labour and Social Security have bought into this vision. Mr. Speaker, my aim is to transform the ministry through the use of technology and innovation. In this regard, we have started with the digitization of records across the ministry. Mr. Speaker, for every worker who contributes to the NIS, we have to keep live records from the time they apply for an NIS number, all their contributions and applications for benefits, and up to after 7 years after they die. Mr. Speaker, valuable real estate is taken up with the storage of paper records. We began the digitization process in 2018, and to date we have scanned over 500,000 records. Accessibility to documents is now made easier and the processing of benefits more timely. Following on this initiative, as we put the ministry into the palm of our citizens' hands, we intend to allow for the online application for all NIS benefits. Since my last presentation, we have piloted the funeral grant online application. This ministry will not allow any bungling in our IT system, and so we are in the final stages of testing before the full rollout. We are cognizant that our pensioners depend heavily on their benefits. In addition, we have just completed an upgrade of our network to fiber optic. This may seem a simple matter, but a lot of the technological improvements could not be done on the old network. With this upgrade, the ministry is in the process of procuring a voice-over internet protocol. The VoIP will enable us to improve our internal and external communications and reduce our phone bill by up to 50% or over $26 million. We are moving to establish a ministry call center where all customer-related calls will be routed to a central point for immediate response. By the end of the financial year, this new system will guarantee that all calls to the ministry will be dealt with promptly. The Overseas Work Program continues to experience steady growth. During fiscal year 2018-19, 16,778 Jamaicans were placed in jobs in the United States, Canada, and Guantanamo Bay. However, Mr. Speaker, we have heard the complaints from workers who say that they have not heard from us or that they have difficulty in contacting the ministry. With some of the challenges we face, my own colleagues on both sides have offered us assistance in locating these workers, for which I am grateful. We are seeking to change it, and by the 2020 season, we will pilot the new Jamaica Canada Farm Work app. This app will allow our Canadian farm workers to access information related to their medical dates, visa appointments, and flight information. They will not have to wait on the ministry's call, but will be able to access information on their smartphones and other electronic devices. Just 2 weeks ago, we launched the Labor Market Information System app and its enhanced website. Mr. Speaker, job seekers and employers are now able to have an even more robust experience through this app with the functionalities of job search, posting of vacancies, and direct application for jobs using their mobile devices. This effectively places employment opportunities in the palms of every employer and job seeker. The app is now available on the Google Play Store for Android devices and will soon be available on the App Store for iOS and Apple devices. Mr. Speaker, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the New Employment Opportunities (NEO) project with its executing body, Youth Upliftment Through Employment Youth, which assisted with the funding of the LMIS upgrade. There is no doubt that these improvements will contribute to increased employment through the electronic labor exchange. To secure greater impact, the ELE has been under constant improvement and upgrading thanks to the support of the Inter-American Development Bank. Mr. Speaker, the results of a labor market study conducted in 2017 by the ministry identified the lack of soft skills such as time management and interpersonal skills as factors impacting the high rate of unemployment of our youth. In order to address this problem, the ministry conducted employability workshops and job fairs for over 1,000 job seekers island-wide. In this financial year, in addition to our LMIS app, we will be ramping up the number of sessions to reach over 1,400 job seekers with special focus on PATH beneficiaries and unattached youth. Mr. Speaker, the second plank on which we are safeguarding dignity in work is by intensifying our public education activities. Last year, I committed to intensifying our national awareness programs and going to the nooks and crannies of Jamaica. This initiative commenced with our community engagement series. The PATH team engaged with 65 communities island-wide, which lacked easy access to our parish offices. Applications to over 3,500 new families or 14,000 individuals were processed. We expect to cover another 25 communities this financial year. Again, Mr. Speaker, we are bringing the ministry into the palm of the citizens' hands. As part of the social intervention initiatives under the zones of special operations, we hosted ministry days in the communities of Denham Town and Mount Salem. Residents were exposed to the range of services offered by the Ministry of Labour and Social Security. A total of 4 days was committed to this intervention. I was deeply touched when one resident shared with me that through this initiative, she was able to gain employment after many years of being unemployed. And there are many other examples like this as we bring hope to the youths and other vulnerable Jamaicans. Mr. Speaker, at the core of managing the labor portfolio is recognition of the inalienable right to decent work for all. The dignity of all workers must be recognized and respected, whether unionized or non-unionized. In this centennial year of the International Labour Organization, we are even more resolute in our determination to translate the concepts around the decent work agenda in more tangible ways to enhance the quality of life for all workers in Jamaica. I'm sure you will agree that sustainable prosperity hinges on industrial harmony. We continue to enjoy a relatively calm and stable industrial relations climate. I would like to bring to your attention the fact that currently most industrial disputes relate to the termination of employment. This, Mr. Speaker, represents a shift from collective disputes usually related to wages to individual disputes. Indeed, there has been a surge in individual disputes reported to the ministry. Given this trend, the pre-conciliation arm of the ministry has been bolstered to offer mediation service and as a first responder to assist parties to reach amicable settlements at the local level. This proactive approach continues to bear fruit. Mr. Speaker, during the 2018-2019 fiscal year, we celebrated the 80th anniversary of the establishment of the Labour Department. As part of the celebrations, the ministry increased public engagement under the theme, The Labour Department and You. 5 road shows were held in Manchester, St. Anne's, St. James, Kingston, and St. Thomas, covering all regions under the purview of the Ministry of Labour and Social Security. Mr. Speaker, I must report to this House that these roadshows effectively reached thousands of Jamaicans from all social strata. This effort, Mr. Speaker, has served as a rebranding of the Labour Department, as all stakeholders are now seeking the services of the department in dispute resolution. They are sensitized to the importance of treating with issues in keeping with law, customs, and practices. In collaboration with the Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions and the Jamaica Employers Federation, several networking sessions were held with workers and employers from small and medium-sized enterprises. Many expressed appreciation for the wealth of information provided, especially in relation to due process in the workplace, occupational safety and health, and child labor. We have seen a significant increase in the number of individual disputes in Western Jamaica, which necessitates our intervention. As we drive the decent work agenda, the road shows continue with a mega show coming in Montego Bay. Mr. Speaker, the work of the Employment Agency Unit is dedicated to securing the integrity of the job-seeking process. The unit continues to issue the mandatory license to private employment agency operators to conduct. We also continue to conduct inspections and to monitor their activities to ensure compliance with the Employment Agencies Regulation Act. Mr. Speaker, to counter scamming, the ministry has embarked on an education campaign utilizing print and electronic media to sensitize vulnerable job seekers of the dangers of utilizing the services of illegal operators. We believe as a ministry that it is our duty to protect employees and job seekers. In furtherance of our resolve, by the end of this calendar year, we will launch our digital marketing campaign. Members of the public, I'm talking to members of the public, I want to bring to your attention that there are many unscrupulous persons pretending to be agents of the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. Let me emphatically state that the ministry does not charge for its services. I urge everyone that if a job offer is too good to be true, it probably is not true. Please do not be scammed. The ministry continues to place great emphasis on human capital development. For many persons, benefits derived from this ministry represents a lifeline, a transition from poverty to prosperity. During 2018-2019 financial year, PATH, our flagship social intervention program, disbursed over $5.3 billion to over 130,000 families or 340,000 beneficiaries. Beginning in June 2019, PATH benefits were increased by an average of 17%. Mr. Speaker, in September 2018, the ministry introduced the PATH Back to School grant for each child registered in school. This grant will continue with over $500 million projected to be spent in the 2019-20 financial year. As promised last year, we will facilitate direct electronic transfers of benefit payments commencing with the August 2019 payment. This will represent a saving on both sides as well as being more discreet and convenient for the families. Mr. Speaker, under the Steps to Works program, the ministry continued to support the entrepreneurial activities of PATH clients in order to provide a platform for families to move towards economic independence. For this financial year, Steps to Work will target 800 PATH households to benefit from upskilling initiatives and another 600 for on-the-job training. Additionally, under this program, a further 1,100 PATH clients will receive financial support to establish micro businesses. Our aim is to ultimately empower persons from the program who no longer qualify for benefits. This on-the-job training is intended to ensure their financial and social stability. If you don't put them in this position of independence, then they will again become dependent on the state for social protection. This, Mr. Speaker, is a perfect example of putting the means to development and economic independence in the palms of our citizens' hands. The PATH program, in its continued commitment to improving the quality of life for our clients, hosted sessions on nutrition, child discipline, and budgeting. The program, which started in 2017, has since engaged 955 households in the parenting program. This year, we intend to engage a further 500 PATH families targeting parents of children aged 2 to 6 years old. Mr. Speaker, among our proudest moments last year were shining examples of former and current PATH beneficiaries now well on their way to self-fulfillment through education. Of note was the fact that the winner of the prestigious Rhodes Scholarship for 2019 was former PATH beneficiary Mr. Shevano Baker. And he is indeed a proud ambassador for PATH. One of our current beneficiaries of PATH, Renoya Anderson, spelling bee champion from Portland, was one of Jamaica's representatives to the Scripps Howard competition in California. Mr. Speaker, in relation to our programming for persons with disabilities, Jamaica continues to reaffirm its commitment to the provisions of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The implementation process to facilitate the Disabilities Act is in full gear. It is our intention to have the first 2 codes of practice and regulations completed by the end of the year. However, as a precursor, we must create the most stable and affirming environment in which to operationalize the Act. My team is now working assiduously to solidify the governance and organizational structure which will enable a modernized and more efficient Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. Mr. Speaker, the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities is set to transition to a body corporate, to a public body. We anticipate an expanded scope, breadth, functions and services of the JCPD, and as such, the Council must be prepared and properly outfitted for this new role. The JCPD has now finalized the operational procedures manual for their suite of services. The accessibility manual obtained from the Access Board in Washington, D.C. is being adapted and reconciled with the measurements specified in the Jamaican Building Code. Lack of awareness is most often the basis for systemic discrimination and social injustice. Mr. Speaker, the JCPD has therefore intensified its public awareness and public education activities to sensitize various social groups about the facts and falsehoods surrounding disability issues. Mr. Speaker, in partnership with the HEART, National Youth Service, the JCPD has delivered 32 public education sessions. The Council is promoting the use of technology and media for persons with disabilities. In that regard, 3 sessions were held with the Office of Utilities Regulations and other service providers regarding the appropriate technology to be utilized to facilitate access to information for persons with disabilities. Initial dialogue has also been held with the Universal Service Fund for them to develop more holistic plans to address the technological needs of the disability sector. As part of the public education thrust, Mr. Speaker, the government could not have done it alone. We thank the media fraternity who have been raising their awareness and educating the public on disability matters and encourage them to remain on board with us. During the 2018-2019 financial year, the JCPD provided grants of up to $250,000 to persons with disabilities. Mr. Speaker, financial assistance in the amount of $16.4 million was spent assisting 551 clients with medical expenses, income generation projects, education, shadow support, special needs, funeral and transportation expenses. A pool of grant funding totaling $17 million is available to persons with disabilities to facilitate their management of small business ventures for their economic development and or to acquire assistive devices to enhance their independence. Mr. Speaker, for persons to access the benefit, they must register with the JCPD. Registration and grant application forms are available through our parish offices or the head office of the JCPD. We must enable persons with disabilities to take their rightful place in our society. Need I remind you that we are putting the ministry in the palms of our citizens' hands. Mr. Speaker, honoring the right to education for children with disabilities is important to the Ministry of Labour. Children with disabilities have a special place within the world of our ministry, as they have at least 2 areas of social vulnerability, by age and by functionality. Over the past year, the Early Stimulation Program has facilitated the transition of 100 children with special needs into mainstream and special education schools. 140 children with disabilities were given a new lease on life with assistive aids such as specialized wheelchairs, hearing aids, and walkers. 1,715 children received therapy treatment through the community-based intervention program for children with disabilities to enhance their physical and emotional health. Let us emphasize abilities, not disabilities, of our very special children. Mr. Speaker, in keeping with the global trend, Jamaica's population is aging and senior citizens comprise 12.6% of the population. This number is expected to rise significantly in the next decade. The National Council for Senior Citizens continues to provide services to the elderly and drive the revision of the national policy for senior citizens with the tabling of a green paper in 2018. We took the green paper to the public with regional town hall meetings in Mandeville and the corporate area. We are now collating inputs on the green paper to validate and fine-tune the policy. We intend to have this document ratified with implementation taking place on a phased basis. Mr. Speaker, in this new global environment, we must constantly benchmark our policies and practices against international standards, even while remaining sensitive to local needs. Through the National Council for Senior Citizens, Jamaica participated in the PAHO WHO technical meeting on aging and health in Latin America and the Caribbean. The gathering analyzed the implementation of the integrated care for older people and a long-term care system in the region. This yielded a specific work schedule of the Ministry of Health and Wellness and PAHO. For the 2018-2019 financial year, the Council's priority areas were education, health, income security, and infrastructure, as well as the Golden Age Support Program. The Council hosted retirement planning seminars and basic computer skills training seminars. In the spirit of promoting active aging, our partnership with the Ministry of Health and Wellness provided programs which allowed more than 1,000 seniors to get moving for fitness and camaraderie. Jamaica was built on the backs of our seniors who sacrificed much. Their rich legacy has armed us with a culture that is both engaging and potentially lucrative. I must therefore appeal to our collective conscience to be more respectful, caring, and inclusive. Many seniors still have much to offer, and they do so willingly. Yet we are constantly saddened by the frequency of elder abuse, financially, emotionally, and physically. Mr. Speaker, it is often said that it takes a village to raise a child, but it takes a civilized nation to safeguard our elders. Bearing in mind, I turn to the National Insurance Scheme. Bearing in mind the situation with social security schemes globally, and not least of all here at home, the value of the work of the National Insurance Fund has peaked in recent years. With a pension population of around 121,000, the NIS disbursed $19.4 billion in benefits, receiving only $17.9 billion in contribution. Mr. Speaker, there remains a gap of $1.5 billion. As our eyes remain fixed on the scheme's viability, the procurement process has commenced to undertake an updated actuarial review during this financial year. The NIF's primary focus is to maximize returns within acceptable risks, while maintaining a level of liquidity to enable timely payment of NIS benefits. The NIF continues to review asset allocations in order to ensure that there is appropriate diversification given the ever-changing dynamics of the investment environment in which the fund operates. As at March 31st, 2019, the net asset value of the fund stood at $120.7 billion, an increase of 13.67% over the financial year 18. He's my good friend, so the growth rate in the fund's net assets value for financial year 19 was driven primarily by the performance of the equity portfolio, which grew by 31.3%. Whilst we await the commencement of an actuarial review, we are mindful of the fact that a significant inflow of funds to the NIF comes from NIS contributions. We are mindful that the NIS is to date the surest form of social protection for Jamaican citizens. Today, as I speak, less than 50% of the workforce are active contributors to the NIS. This is unacceptable, especially when we look at the statistics with respect to the aging population and the demands that will be made to provide for their well-being and welfare. Under the law, every worker over the age of 18 must register with the NIS. It is incumbent on us as a ministry to engage these persons wherever they are so that they can contribute to the NIS. It is the responsibility of every employer to pay over contributions for persons in their employ and to ensure that all workers, contract or otherwise, contribute to the NIS in keeping with the provisions of the law. Mr. Speaker, we want to cultivate dignity in work and we want to protect the next generation. Last year, I announced that a United States Department of Labor funded project, the Country-Level Engagement and Assistance to Reduce Child Labor, CLEAR 2, had been tailored for Jamaica. We have since made significant progress as we have now finalized the lists of work that is permissible for children ages 13 to 14 years, as well as a hazardous work list circumscribing the kind of environment in which children should never be employed. I'm pleased to advise that we are advanced in the development and review of a national action plan on child labor. We are giving special consideration to the uniqueness of child labor at the parish level to address the specific root causes of this problem. The Jamaica Youth Activity Survey, which was published in 2018, revealed that 38,000 Jamaican children were engaged in child labor. The ministry responded by conducting a suite of community-level interventions with students, teachers, and mixed audiences to sensitize them about the ills of child labor and human trafficking. Mr. Speaker, June 12, 2019 was observed as World Day Against Child Labor. To mark the occasion, the ministry mounted a march from our North Street office to St. William Grant Park, downtown Kingston. Our message was, children should not be working in the fields, but on their dreams. We remain committed to eradicating this injustice meted out to our children. We know that this will not be easy, but we remain resolute as we intensify the implementation of plans and policies to rid Jamaica of this scourge. Mr. Speaker, on the advice of the National Minimum Wage Commission last year, I approved an increase of 12.9% in the national minimum wage. This represents the highest increase ever granted. Mr. Speaker, let me emphasize that the review of the minimum wage is ongoing. The Commission will again be engaging the public in consultation as it conducts its review and makes recommendations for an adjustment to the minimum wage. Let me remind all of us that the national minimum wage is a floor and not a ceiling. It is a social protection mechanism and legally defines the lowest compensation for any Jamaican worker. Therefore, I commend all employers who routinely compensate above this threshold to honor the value of their employees. Mr. Speaker, let me now give an update on the progress we have made towards the enactment of the Occupational Safety and Health Bill. This piece of legislation, which supports a decent work agenda, addresses safety and health in the Jamaican workplace. Currently, the bill is before a joint select committee of Parliament for consideration. The committee has been deliberating on submissions received from both private and public sector organizations. While the process is taking longer than we would have expected, this is about diligence, not negligence. By its nature and purpose, the bill is quite complex, and the committee is reviewing the bill clause by clause to ensure that we have the best legislation possible. We cannot take any risks as our collective health and safety in the workplace is paramount. Mr. Speaker, global realities include migrant labor. Just as we welcome employment opportunities abroad for our people, so we welcome foreigners to fill gaps in our labor market. I wish to assure every Jamaican that we issue work permits with due consideration and in full compliance with the governing regulations. In our quest for continued improvement, we have amended the Foreign Nationals and Commonwealth Citizens Work Permit Fees Regulations 1973 to streamline and simplify the work permit fees payable by sector. We have eliminated one administrative layer by excluding partial refunds to permit holders who depart before the expiration of their documents. These amendments took effect on April 1st, 2019. Mr. Speaker, sustainable economic growth can only be achieved through national productivity improvement. The Ministry has mandated the Jamaica Productivity Center to create a strategic direction that helps Jamaica to step boldly up the productivity ladder. Quite honestly, Mr. Speaker, we have much work to do together. A 2017 productivity performance study by the JPC revealed negative labor productivity growth for almost every industry within the Jamaican economy. The only sector an exception was manufacturing. We urgently need a sector-by-sector analysis to identify the issues affecting productivity. We must do this to ignite the overall economy and, by extension, to raise the standards of living for Jamaicans. In support of our mandate and to foster a culture of productivity, we have begun the groundwork for the development of a national policy for productivity improvement. We are working with our youth to ensure that they understand that the real-world relevance of productivity and how it applies to their own day-to-day endeavors. Along with our education partners, the JPC is identifying student productivity ambassadors. We are also working to increase the number of productivity clubs in schools. We are confident that our students will see the importance and direct impact of productivity in their academic and social life. Mr. Speaker, with greater productivity, we are putting prosperity in the palm of the citizens' hand. Even as the economy continues to grow, we are mindful that there are still many Jamaicans who need additional support. This is where the Ministry's Public Assistance Department comes in. Last year, the Ministry provided grants totaling $110 million under the Rehabilitation Program. The grants provided ease the plight of 3,400 Jamaicans in their time of grief, as well as recovery from natural or man-made disasters. Under the Short-Term Poverty Intervention Program, 3,928 Jamaicans benefited from $65 million in grants. As the primary agency responsible for coordinating humanitarian assistance during times of disaster, we are thankful for the relatively calm 2018 hurricane season. We are, however, pleased to report that the emergency grants were provided to 732 persons with a total payout of approximately $20 million. Bedding, toiletries, and other supplies valuing over $19 million were also provided to more than 600 families. The Ministry has embarked upon a number of initiatives aimed at improving our facilities. We are aware that as a service ministry, we need to ensure that our facilities provide greater accessibility and comfort to our internal and external clients. In this regard, we are pursuing a number of initiatives, and these include the opening of new or improved offices. A new parish office was opened in Hanover on the 28th of February. Construction is almost complete for a new office in St. Anne, and it is expected to be officially opened by December 2019. Our St. James office is to be completely renovated and will be opened in the 2020-2021 financial year. The drawings to completely renovate the NIS office located at 18 Ripon Road has been finalized and will shortly be put to tender. The renovation of the facilities at the Overseas Employment Center on East Street continues this year. Mr. Speaker, the main offices of the Labor Division of the Ministry is located at 1F North Street. The building was in need of extensive repairs on the exterior. Those repairs are almost completed. Mr. Speaker, in its 45 years of existence, it is the second time the building exterior is being painted. Members of this House, I must admit that I came last year and promised that we would have opened an arm of the Industrial Disputes Tribunal in the Western Parish of St. James. But finding suitable and affordable space in the West proves to be more difficult than expected. I'm pleased to report that a lease has been signed and the contract for the renovation has also been signed. IDT West will soon become a reality. And whenever I talk about IDT West, I must mention a member from North Clarendon whose idea it was.
Ignore him. Don't think about it.
Of course. Of course. Yeah.
Sit down, you're riffraff. Sit down.
We are increasing the number of public access points to the ELE through the installation of kiosks in our parish offices. St. Catherine, St. Anne, and Hanover have already been outfitted with St. Elizabeth and Harbour Street next in line. We are also exploring standalone units at partner locations such as the Up Park Camp facility of the Jamaica Defence Force. We are also trying to ensure that the key services of the ministry are accessible to the communities and deep rural Jamaica. So we are in the process of procuring 3 buses that will be used as mobile offices to aid in the delivery of and greater access to the services of the ministry. The services include the registration of NIS beneficiaries, PATH, senior citizens, and persons with disabilities. Mr. Speaker, we must find those in need if we intend to be there for them. Again, Mr. Speaker, we are putting the services of the ministry in the palms of the citizens' hands. Importantly, Mr. Speaker, there are 2 matters that I wish to address in this Honourable House. These matters which relate to security guards and contract work. It has dominated the public space, political and otherwise, over the past months. The ministry has been monitoring the situation concerning the status and entitlements of security guards. Over the years, several complaints of companies failing to pay various entitlements have been brought to our attention. In response to those complaints, the ministry seeks to arrive at a settlement between the security guards and the companies. Where there is no settlement, those cases are referred to the courts. We wish to report that in most of those instances, the decisions have been in favor of security guards. We have been collaborating with the Private Security Regulation Authority to ensure that companies observe our labor laws and the standards for decent work. This ministry and the Private Security Regulation Authority will undertake initiatives to strengthen enforcement capabilities and efficiencies in both entities. The ministry is moving to prosecute companies which are in breach of the labor laws. Since June of this year, 5 companies have been referred to the ministry's legal division for prosecution. It is our intention that all companies flouting the law will eventually be held accountable. Mr. Speaker, this ministry is sending a warning to all security companies that if you breach the law, you will face the consequences. Notwithstanding previous initiatives as well as those now underway, as Minister of Labour, I will be placing the matter of the status and work arrangements of security guards before a joint select committee of the Parliament. This will allow the issues affecting security guards to be ventilated and deliberated through open and transparent public discourse. Mr. Speaker, this Minister of Labour is committed to a resolution of this important issue once and for all. The ministry has been paying careful attention to the discussions surrounding contract work. Like the International Labour Organization, we recognize that there are often benefits associated with fixed-term contract employment. These arrangements, considered to be a form of non-standard work, have become increasingly popular in newly established positions and emerging occupations. They often provide flexibility to enterprises, allowing them to respond to various operational changes and demands. In the right situations, contract work also provides benefits to workers. It is common knowledge that certain workers opt for fixed-term contract for reasons which includes attractive gratuity payments. The ministry therefore recognizes that not all contract work is undesirable. The problem arises, however, where contractual arrangements are used as a ploy to remove from workers certain statutory rights, entitlements, and protection prescribed by law. A common example is where a contract may seek to disguise the employer-employee relationships as a means of denying a worker vacation and maternity leave, or to relieve the employer of obligations to workers such as health care and pensions. It is in these type of circumstances that contract work is considered to be precarious and oppressive. Where the ministry becomes aware of these situations, every effort is made to assist these workers to obtain the entitlements due to them under law by referring the matters to the courts or to the Industrial Disputes Tribunal. Mr. Speaker, I wish to assure the public that the ministry is concerned with the trend of precariousness in contract employment. We also find troubling global reports which points to underinvestment in training.
Minister Samuel, the member's time for speaking has expired. You may wish to.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I move that the member's time be extended to enable her to complete her presentation.
Those in favour? Aye. Those against? As of it. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, colleagues. Mr. Speaker, I wish to assure the public that the ministry is concerned with the trend of precariousness in contract employment. We also find troubling global reports which points to underinvestment in training, innovation, and lowered productivity associated with these forms of contractual arrangements. In this regard, the ministry is prepared to examine good practices internationally and to engage tripartite discussions with a view of carving out an appropriate national response, balancing the interests of both employers and employees. Mr. Speaker, this afternoon it has been my honor to outline to this Honourable House our achievements and plans under the twin portfolios of labour and social security. We are guided by the common vision as stated in Vision 2030. Jamaica, the place of choice to live, work, raise families and do business, and in the words of the Prime Minister, to also retire. This administration, Mr. Speaker, was handed a mandate by the people of Jamaica to deliver on our commitment for a more prosperous nation. We remain committed as the ministry not only seeks to create an enabling environment for the creation of opportunities, but also deploys a mission to mobilize Jamaicans to capitalize on those opportunities, working through strategic partnerships to bring about prosperity to this great nation. The task is demanding but not insurmountable, and so the ministry is committed to protecting the vulnerable, to economic growth through increased productivity and human capital development so that we can continue to compete in the global marketplace, provide decent work, and raise the standard of living for all Jamaicans. I therefore invite every citizen to become active partners in this national effort to safeguard dignity in work and demonstrate true respect for all as we build a better future for Jamaica. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I ask that the House recommit a recommittal of items, bills brought from the Senate through to presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained.
Members, I'm putting a resolution. Those in favour? Those against? As of it.
And Mr. Speaker,
bills brought from the Senate.
Mr. Speaker, I further move that the time being beyond 3:20, that the House be permitted to take the items, questions and answers to questions.
Those in favour? Minister, I did not hear you. You're seeking for the House to sit beyond?
No, the question and answers to question beyond 3:30. That's in order to take a question which I understand is forthcoming. And in addition, I'm advised we need to go back to announcements to announce, the clerk announce the laying of a table. on the table of the House from the Minister of Labour and Social Security.
Those in favor? Those against? Ayes have it. Announcements. Announcements.
Also laid on the table of the House today is the Ministry of Labour and Social Security Annual Performance Report 2018-2019.
Petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally. Dr. Chang.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following two motions. First, the Intercept of Communications Amendment to First Schedule Order 2019 Resolution. Whereas under Section 18(1) of the Interception of Communication Act, the Minister may by order add to or delete from the list of offences contained in the first schedule. And whereas under Section 18(1) of the Act, the Minister made the Interception of Communications Amendment to First Schedule Order 2019, and whereas it is provided by Section 18(2) of the Act that an order made under Section 18(1) shall be subject to affirmative resolution. And whereas it is desirable that the Interception of Communication Amendment to First Schedule Order 2019 be affirmed, now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. The resolution may be cited as the Interception of Communications Amendment to First Schedule Order 2019 Resolution. The Interception of Communication Amendment to First Schedule Order 2019, which was laid on the table of the House on the 9th day of July 2019. Number two, Mr. Speaker, the Proceeds of Crime Amendment to the Second Schedule Order 2019 Resolution. Whereas under Section 6(4) of the Proceeds of Crime Act, the Minister may order, subject to affirmative resolution, amend the second schedule of the Act. And whereas under Section 6(4) of the Act, the Minister made the Proceeds of Crime Amendment to Second Schedule Order 2019, and whereas it is desirable that the Proceeds of Crime Amendment to Second Schedule Order 2019 be affirmed, now therefore be resolved by the Honourable House as follows. This resolution may be cited as the Proceeds of Crime Amendment to Second Schedule Order 2019 Resolution. The Proceeds of Crime Amendment to Second Schedule Order 2019, which was laid on the table of the House on the 9th day of July 2019, affirmed. Mr. Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take these motions.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House I will move. Be it resolved with reference to the resolutions passed by this Honourable House on the 12th day of February 2019, agreeing that the composition of all committees of this Honourable House remains unchanged in this session of Parliament, except by approved resolution of this Honourable House, that the name Dr. Dayton Campbell be removed from the membership of the Human Resource and Social Development Committee, and that the name Philip Paulwell be substituted therefore. Be it further resolved, Mr. Speaker, that the name Dayton Campbell be removed from the membership of the Regulations Committee, and the name Dr. Angela Brown-Burke be substituted therefore. Mr. Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion.
Mr. Speaker, no.
Dr. Green.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move to introduce and have read a first time a bill shortly entitled the Sexual Harassment Act 2019.
Minister Green. Minister Green had indicated what? What is he doing?
Mr. Speaker, I have to choose a matter with a bill from the Senate.
Not yet. I'm coming to you.
Mr. Speaker, I now ask.
Not yet.
The following is a message from the President of the Senate
Speak in the mic.
to the Honorable House of Representatives. I have the honor to advise the Honorable House of Representatives that on the 14th day of June 2019, a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Food Storage and Prevention of Infestation Act and for Connected Matters was passed in the Senate with 24 amendments, for which the Senate desires the concurrence of the House. I also have the honor to advise the Honorable House of Representatives that on the 5th day of July 2019, a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Bauxite and Alumina Industries Encouragement Act and a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Petroleum Act by repealing Part 3A in respect of the integration of the functions of the Petro-Carib Development Fund into central government and for connected matters were passed in the Senate without amendment. Signed, Thomas Tavares Vincent, CD, QDC, JP, July 9, 2019.
Mr. Speaker, I now ask for your consent that the Senate amendments to the bill shortly entitled the Food Storage and Prevention of Infestation Amendment Act 2019 be now considered and approved.
Consent given. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Food Storage and Prevention of Infestation Act and regulations has been enacted 1958 and 1973 respectively. Many provisions are therefore, Mr. Speaker, outdated. The government, through the Ministry of Industry, Commerce, Agriculture and Fisheries, took the decision to modernize the Act and regulation in light of modern changes and developments in the relevant industries. The Food Storage and Prevention of Infestation Amendment Bill was passed in the lower house and thereafter in the Senate on June 14, 2019, with 24 amendments. The significant amendments in the Senate relate to the treatment of offenses and penalties. Other changes sought to provide greater clarity in certain definitions and provisions to make the bill, Mr. Speaker, more comprehensive. The following reflects the section of the Principal Act to which the amendments gave effect. Mr. Speaker, in Clause 2, the definition of device is expanded to include any readable electronic device. In the definition of infestation, the words "as determined by the inspector" are inserted to indicate that it is the inspector who determines what is to be considered as being infestation. The definition of place was amended, Mr. Speaker, to remove the reference to shipping container, as this was already provided for in the Principal Act. Section 5 of the Act, Mr. Speaker, is amended to replace the itemization of the specific risk that may exist in the storage and transportation of food with the general terms where there is an immediate or potential risk that infestation or contamination of an article to which this Act applies. The amendment to Section 7 of the Principal Act, Mr. Speaker, expands the persons to whom an operator who falls within the Act must give written notice if it comes to his knowledge of any infestation or contamination. Under the Principal Act, notice was required to be given to the minister only. However, with this amendment, notice must also be given to the Chief Food Storage Officer. Failure to give such notice, Mr. Speaker, is an offense. Further, the word premises is substituted by the word place, which includes premises. Section 9 of the Act speaks to the offenses and sanctions under the Principal Act. Clause 8, Mr. Speaker, amends this section by deleting subsection 1 and substituting the following. Any person who contravenes any provisions under the Act, regulations made or direction given by thereunder, for which no specific penalty is provided, shall be liable on summary conviction before a judge of the parish court to, in the case of a first offence, of a fine not exceeding 3 million, or imprisonment to a term not exceeding 3 years. If damage is caused as a commission of the offence, the fine is 4 million, or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 4 years. For second or subsequent offences, Mr. Speaker, committed regardless of whether or not there is damage, to a fine not exceeding 5 million, or a prison or imprisonment of a term not exceeding 5 years. This clause is also amended to include matters brought before the circuit court. In the case of a first offence, without damage, fine or imprisonment to a term not exceeding 7 years. If damage is caused to the commission of an offence, a fine or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 10 years. In the case of a second or subsequent offence, committed regardless of whether or not damage is caused, a fine or imprisonment of a term not exceeding 15 years. Mr. Speaker, the section is further being amended to make it an offence where any person assault or obstruct an officer, where any person removes from any container any seal affixed by an officer under this Act, and 3, where any officer uses any power afforded to him under this Act for personal gain. A new regulation 2A, Mr. Speaker, is inserted to provide that food shall not be transported with any toxic substance to contaminate the food. This regulation also provides that the container previously used for the transportation of a toxic substance shall be cleaned by a method prescribed by the Chief Food Storage Officer. Failure to comply with this regulation is an offence. A new regulation, Mr. Speaker, of 2B, an offence has been created for storing food in a storage area with a toxic substance without an impermeable partition between the food and the toxic substance and failing to properly label container. An offence has been created for failure to store food in accordance with the regulation. And Regulation 4, an offence is created for failure to adhere to the building requirements in which food is stored or kept for sale. An offence is created under new Regulation 5A for conducting disinfestation operations in or around any article to which this Act applies without certification from the Chief Food Storage Officer. Regulation 6, Mr. Speaker, failure to properly clean and disinfect any container not destroyed immediately after use is now an offence. Under Regulation 8, Regulation 8.1 is being amended to create an offence for failure to keep records of specified treatments. Regulation 9.1a is being amended to create an offence for the use of substances not specified in Part 1 and 2 of the schedule to the regulations for various purposes, including direct application to food and permeable containers holding food. Regulation 9.1b is being amended to create an offence for the use of substances not specified in Part 1 and 2, 3, and 4 of the schedule to the regulations for any purpose or in any circumstances in premises where food is or is likely to be kept for sale, stored, or manufactured. Regulation 10, Mr. Speaker, has been amended to create an offence where any person other than the operators or persons employed to or working under the direct supervision of such operators use of any substance specified part 5, 6, 7, 8 of the second schedule to the regulations for any such purpose or in any such manner or place other than prescribed without a license. Regulation 11 is being amended to create an offence where an operator fails to comply with the requirements of the third schedule to these regulations relating to the protection of worker or other persons. Regulation 12 is being amended to create an offence where a person whose business consists of the manufacture, storage, or keeping of food, and who undertakes in course of that business to handle or apply substances specified in Part 5 of these regulations fails to comply with the requirements of the third schedule to the regulations relating to the protection of the worker and other persons. Mr. Speaker, Regulation 20 is being amended to provide that an inspector may take photographs of any part of any place or vehicle or use a recording device to record images of any part of any place or vehicle entered by such inspectors under the Act. Regulation 22, under this regulation, Mr. Speaker, it provides that the Chief Food Storage Officer shall issue a certificate of compliance in the prescribed form to the owner of the premises for a period of 1 year, where it is determined that the owner of the premises has complied with the provisions of the regulations. The regulation further provides that an owner of a premises shall display the certificate in a conspicuous place on the premises. The new Regulation 24 provides for the inclusion of a sixth schedule consisting of offences and penalties under these regulations. This new sixth schedule provides, Mr. Speaker, for a listing of penalties and offences. Those are the amendments, Mr. Speaker, coming from the Senate.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I now ask that the Senate amendments to the Food Storage and Prevention of Infestation Amendment Act be now considered.
Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Mr. Muda. Questions and answers to questions.
Mr. Speaker, I ask that the question standing in my name to the Minister of National Security be tabled.
Mr. Stewart.
Mr. Speaker, at the expiration of 21 days, I will ask the Honourable Minister of National Security the following questions.
Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sittings of the House. Motions for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained. Public business. Dr. Chung.
It's not a bias to Peter. It's not a bias to Peter one. but we communicate very regularly. All right.
Mr. Speaker, where it says that on the recommendation of the minister, does that mean the minister on the recommendation of the security forces, then you initiate that an intercept be done? You follow what I'm saying? No, I just want to know. It's a point that is always very important to note.
All intercept will have to go for a warrant to the judges.
I say what?
Must go to the warrant must be obtained from the courts.
Okay.
Must be obtained. Basis.
So is the minister seek the warrant or the security forces?
Security forces.
Okay.
Through the AG. Mr. Speaker, I now move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take the motions which I gave earlier. Right?
Mr. Speaker,
one minute, I think. Those in favor? Those against? Ayes have it. Mr. Summary, you have to hold. Dr. Chang.
what is he? You're doing both?
What is it?
Here's one thing.
They're doing them together. It's a short. Mr. Speaker, I want to present to this Honourable House for its consideration and affirmation two resolutions. Both resolutions arise from the deliberations of the Joint Select Committee reviewing the Criminal Justice Suppression of Criminal Organization Act 2014. One in relation to the Interception of Communications Act, titled the Interception of Communication Act Amendment to First Schedule Order 2019 Resolution, and another in relation to the Proceeds of Crime Act, titled the Proceeds of Crime Amendment to Second Schedule Order 2019. The Criminal Justice Suppression of Criminal Organization Act, commonly referred to as the Anti-Gang Act, was enacted in April 2014. The legislation was developed as a response to the growing presence of criminal organization in Jamaica and the relationship between the activities of these groups, gangs, and the increasing levels of crime and violence throughout the country. Several entities, including government agencies and departments, were invited to make presentation in relation to the efficacy and efficiency of the Act. Those entities included the Major Organized Crime and Anti-Corruption Agency, Jamaica Constabulary Force, and the Director of Public Prosecutions. These entities have highlighted deficiencies in the operationalization of the legislation in their effort to suppress criminal organizations. And in fact, further review is taking place as a current case is going to the court. In addition to that, many private sector organizations and non-governmental organizations made submissions to the Joint Select Committee. Two issues were highlighted, however, that we think we could deal with by the current orders. Interception of Communication Act does not allow for the interception of offences under the Criminal Justice Suppression of Criminal Organization Act 2014, and that the offences in the Criminal Justice Suppression of Criminal Act were not included in the schedule containing offences that are classified as criminal lifestyle in the Proceeds of Crime Act. Therefore, in an effort to correct these issues, these resolutions are being brought here today. Mr. Speaker, the objective of the resolution in relation to the Interception of Communication Act is to include offences under the Criminal Justice Suppression of Criminal Organization Act in the list of applicable offences outlined in the first schedule of the Interception of Communication Act. This would mean that specific law enforcement officers, will be empowered to apply to the court for a warrant authorizing the person named in the warrant to intercept communication and disclose the intercepted communication as specified in the warrant. The offences for which interception would be allowed would be any offence under Part 2 of the Criminal Justice Suppression of Criminal Organization Act and include the offences of A. Forming or establishing criminal organization, B. Recruiting child to criminal organization, recruitment of adult to criminal organization, providing benefit to or obtaining a benefit from a criminal organization, and aiding and abetting a criminal organization. Mr. Speaker, upon the recommendation from the opposition, for which we are grateful, we have also used the opportunity to also include offences under the Law Reform Fraudulent Transactions Special Provisions Act. Similarly, this would enable police officers to apply to the court for a warrant to intercept communications in relation to offences under what is commonly referred to as the Lottery Scamming Act. Mr. Speaker, the objective of the resolution in relation to the Proceeds of Crime Act is to include Criminal Justice Suppression of Criminal Organization Act offences in the second schedule of the Proceeds of Crime Act, where specified offences that are classified as criminal lifestyle offences are outlined. Mr. Speaker, when an application for a forfeiture order or a pecuniary penalty order is made by the Assets Recovery Agency or the Director of Public Prosecutions, the court shall determine whether the defendant has a criminal lifestyle and whether he or she has benefited from his criminal conduct, his or her. Once the anti-gang offence are included in the second schedule of the Proceeds of Crime Act, this will enable the court to find that a defendant convicted of such an offence has a criminal lifestyle. It will also enable the court to determine whether the defendant has benefited from his or her general criminal conduct, as in accordance with Section 8 of the Proceeds of Crime Act, once a person is convicted of a criminal lifestyle offence, the court is entitled to make certain rebuttable assumptions when calculating the person's benefit from criminal conduct. These assumptions include the assumption that any property which the person obtained 10 years prior to being charged for the offence was obtained as a result of his or her general criminal conduct. That allows you, as indicated, members, to look back 10 years in his life, whatever he has obtained as a result of criminal conduct. The evidential burden in these circumstances shifts to the defendant to satisfy the court that the property was legitimately obtained. Once the court determines that the defendant has benefited from his or her general criminal conduct, then the court shall identify the property and make an order that the property be forfeited to the Crown, a forfeiture order, or an order that the defendant pay to the Crown an amount equal to the value of his benefits, a pecuniary penalty order. The offences we wish to be specified as criminal lifestyle offences are any offence under Part 2 of the Criminal Justice Suppression of Criminal Organization Act. These are the same offences for which intercepts would be done as highlighted earlier. Mr. Speaker, we have decided to seize on this opportunity to expand the POCA's reach, that's the Proceeds of Crime Act, and include offences to which the concept of criminal lifestyle could be applied. As such, we have also included certain breaches of the Pre-Larceny Prevention Act, the Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Act, the Securities Act, Trademark Act, as well as the Dangerous Drug Act. Mr. Speaker, we are of the view that these resolutions will ameliorate some of the challenges being faced with the Criminal Justice Suppression of Criminal Organization Act, whilst other challenges are currently being addressed by an ongoing Joint Select Committee of Parliament. The resolution will also aid in targeting offences under other legislation where there could be manifestations of a criminal lifestyle. It is noted that not all the challenges can be addressed through legislation, and therefore, in the coming months, increased training and sensitization sessions will have to be conducted involving all stakeholders in order to achieve greater success against criminal organization. That work has started, and greater effort and collaboration between the police and the Director of Public Prosecutor's Office has in fact increased the capacity and the effectiveness of applying not only this law but other legislation that is designed to assist us, the country, in apprehending and prosecuting criminals and criminal organizations. So, Speaker, it is for these reasons, therefore, I invite the members to affirm this resolution in the House today. Thank you.
Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as the Minister indicated, the resolution before us is not a controversial one. These amendments to the bill, to the act referred to, emanated from the current joint select deliberations on the anti-crime bill. It's a bit, though late, these pieces of amendment will serve to strengthen the anti-crime legislation as part of the tool that can help to fight crime. We are aware, Mr. Speaker, that it's fully documented that gangs are responsible for most of the murders. Many of the gangs survive because of the economic benefit that comes to them. The lottery scamming, for example, is all about enrichment, criminal enrichment. And it was felt that while we are going through the amendment to that bill at this time, we should not wait until that exercise is completed, but to strengthen the existing legislation that can enable our security forces to use the provisions in the Intercept Bill as another tool to strengthen the apprehension of criminals, and also, as the Minister indicated, to also make a reach into the economic gains that will accrue from their criminal enterprise. We take pleasure in giving support to this, long overdue, but it is finally here. And we stand ready as an opposition to give support to legislative development of this sort that can help to strengthen our capacity to deal with crime and criminal activity in Jamaica. I do join the Minister in asking the fellow members to give their support to the resolution before us.
Dr. Chan.
You're not speaking, right? Now invite the Speaker. The strengthening of a legislative framework to fight crime is crucial at this time. It's also true that in bringing the orders to the House, we have, in considering the anti-gang bill, realized that we have several pieces of legislation out there that we need to apply and execute. And it's not just new law that is required, it's so much more the sensitization of the various stakeholders and ensuring that all those who are involved, from the police and other agencies of government, become aware of the many bits of legislation that we have passed in this House to deal with criminal activity. And in fact, it's out of that review, as we looked at the anti-gang activity, we decided that these orders and a number of others will be brought to this House. So at this point, I ask for the House to affirm the orders that have been placed on this. Thank you. Thank you. Formally, ask that they be approved, affirmed. We ask the orders to be affirmed. The intercept order and the process of crime order. The interception of communication amendment to the first schedule order 2019 resolution and the process of crime amendment to second schedule order 2019 resolution be affirmed by this Honourable House. And ask that they be taken together.
Those in favor? Those against? As have it.
Mr. Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier.
Those in favor? Those against? As have it.
Mr. Speaker, I now move that the motion, notice of which I gave earlier, be approved.
Those in favor? Those against? As have it.
Mr. Speaker, it is not intended to do any further business today. I invite you, therefore, to suspend the sitting until next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Thank you.
The motion is that the House may now adjourn until next Tuesday the 16th at 2 p.m. Those in favor? Those against? As have it. The House now stands adjourned.